My name is Julie Boyd and this is a tutorial for the Design and Technology Association on how to do an open seam.
A seam is a way of joining two pieces of textiles material together. It's important to choose the right seam and to stitch it accurately in order to get a quality end product. It's an easy seam to do and its importance can sometimes be overlooked because of that. It's a starting point though for most other seams, so often it's a key technique for constructing a product. Accuracy is therefore absolutely essential, and students need to be encouraged to follow various quality control procedures as they're making their seam. Things such as measuring, choosing the right stitch and being able to sew straight. Here we have an example of two open seams, one where we can see the right side of the fabric and see what the join would look like, and the second one where we can see what it would look like on the inside. Notice the two rows of neatening stitches along the edge of the seam. Often students think that because we can't see the joins on the inside of the fabric that we don't need to neaten them off, but that really is a key point if you want a quality product. As well as being an easy seam to do, this seam is also used where we want to apply a zip to a product, and here you can see the zip sitting on the surface of the open seam. To create this seam, I've placed the two edges of the fabric so that the top edges match exactly, and then I'm just going to pin the fabrics together. I'm placing my pins at right angles. I find that easier to do. You don't have to put pins in, you can machine it without pins, but I do find putting pins in helps to get things more accurate. So I'm lining up my fabric, my two fabric edges just here, in line with the 1.5 centimetre marking that's on the bottom of my machine. Just putting my presser foot down. And I'm going to do a fixing stitch. So on my machine I've got a button here. I can just press and it gives me a fixing stitch to neaten off that end. You may have something different on your own machine. I'm then going to machine down my row, just taking my pins out before I get to them. All the time watching this edge of the fabric going along the marker on the bottom of the machine. So in this instance I'm not watching the needle, I'm watching this edge along here. Take my last pin out, down to the bottom, just before I get to the edge. I'm just going to do my fixing stitch the same as I did at the beginning, and I'm going to take my fabric out and just cut my threads. This is a closer look at the markings on the machine that will help students get a more accurate seam allowance. You saw me using the edge of the fabric up against the 1.5 centimetre marking earlier on. The term seam allowance refers to this, the distance between the edge of the fabric and where the two fabrics are joined together. A standard seam allowance on a shop bought pattern is usually 1.5 centimetres, but in industry the widths can vary. The basic rule is that whatever amount has been added onto the pattern has to be removed, otherwise the product won't be the right size. So accurate seam allowances are absolutely vital for students to get a quality finish on a product. To help me get that quality finish on my product, I also need to press whatever I stitch at regular intervals. So here I'm just going to press open the seam. Even if I was going to close this seam afterwards, I would still press it open. The reason for that is you get a nice quality sort of sharp edge at each stage of making. The seam itself is now complete, but I can't just leave that with these raw edges along here. So even if it's going inside a product and won't be seen, to get a quality finish I would normally neaten this off somehow. I'm going to neaten this off using the overlocker, so I'm just opening this edge out, so there's just the one layer that I'm going to be stitching on just here, and I can either lift my presser foot up on my overlocker to pop it underneath, or in this case I can just let it feed itself in. And I'm overlocking just so that the very edge of the fabric is going past the blade, so I'm not cutting anything off apart from just trimming down the very edges of the fabric. When I get to the ends I'm just going to chain off, pulling gently at the back, and then I can cut my threads off. So here's my first side complete just here. Now I'm just going to open up the other side and do the same there. So here's my completed seam with the edges overlocked, so you can see the right side and the wrong side there. If you don't have an overlocker, the alternative is to neaten the edges of the seam with an ordinary zigzag on a sewing machine.